Assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Sayyid Muhammad Reza, and joined with me today is my dear brother Sayyid Muhammad JawadQazwini. I'd like to welcome you all to the 6th episode of the Qazwini Brothers podcast. First, we'd both like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the positivity you guys have been showing us, for the appreciation, and we appreciate everyone who's been following us. I know I've been enjoying doing this podcast. I'm sure you have as well. Today we'll be talking about books. Basically, in an age where screens rule everything, we're all digitalized, our whole life is based on screens and TVs and phones. We want to talk about the importance of picking up a book and the benefits to that.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected brothers and sisters, I also begin in the name of Allah, the gracious, the most merciful. And welcome back to another episode of our show. I definitely want to say that this could be one of the most life-changing decisions that one person can make. Whether to have a relationship with books or not, to basically be someone who is always friendly with books. I think a human's best friend is a book, or his books, is his library. If you decide to make this change within your life, then to basically begin reading and stay reading, I think this is the greatest decision one person can make.
Mm-hmm.
It will have unbelievable impact on a person's life. And avoiding reading could be the biggest mistake a person can make as well. So,
right.
In fact, one of the most important episodes, one of the most important topics that we have chosen to discuss could be this one.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like we have a good discussion in store today. We're going to be going over these main points tonight. We're going to talk about why we should read books. We'll talk about how to start reading and to stay reading. We'll talk about the relationship between scholars and books. We're going to talk about how, what books are beneficial. Is any book a good book? And then we'll talk about our favorite books and how we like to read and stuff like that. According to a Pew Research poll, 27% of U.S. adults, Pew did a research poll and asked people if they read a book in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And 27% of people that were polled said no, we hadn't read a book in the last 12 months. Of those people who hadn't read a book, over 36% of them only had an annual income of $30,000 a year. And 8% of them had an annual income of over $75,000 a year. So basically the ones that read made more money. And that's not really what we're trying to say here, but that's just a little bit of insight to show, reading goes hand in hand with success. So why is it important for us to read? Why should we read books?
First of all, let me say this, that I believe Islam does not require only from the Muslim community to be a community that prays and fasts and performs the pilgrimage and is always involved in acts of worship.
Mm-hmm.
Islam is a religion that first and foremost requires the Muslims to be aware,
Mm-hmm.
To be educated, to be alert. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that clear throughout the Holy Quran. I can quote many verses for you. For example, the most famous verse in the Holy Quran, Ayat al-Kursi in Surah Al-Baqarah, says, Allah waliyu alladhina amanu yukhrijahum min al-dhulumati ila an-nur. Allah takes out the believers from darkness into light. Now, this does not mean He literally drags them
Right.
and puts them in a different scenario, which is an enlightened one.
Mm-hmm.
No, this means that through the religion of Islam, People are more aware. People are not confused, but they are certain. People are educated. They are not ignorant. How so? Through the religion of Islam, through the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. In fact, this is what Fatima Zahra salawatullahi alayha emphasized on in her khutbah of Fadak after the demise of Rasulullah, in her very famous khutbah, when she was surrounded by the women of Bani Hashim, and she then went into the Masjid of Rasulullah, and there was Abu Bakr and Umar and the rest of the companions, Al-Muhajirin, Al-Ansar, the immigrants, the indigenous people of Medina, and she gave a prolonged sermon about how her right of Fadak was usurped. Now, this sermon is not something that is that could be denied by anybody, because the language, if you doubt the fact that the sermon exists, or it actually was indeed said by Fatima Zahra, one can go and read the sermon and determine from the language that this has got to be the language of the Ahlul Bayt, because the way they spoke, nobody else was able to do so. Anyhow, there is a segment in this sermon that says, you Arabs, you the people of the Arabian Peninsula, weren't you the ones that were killing one another for 1,000 years with no peace amongst you? And wasn't my father the one that turned you into brethren? So remember this great blessing from Allah unto you. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. So, and she read this ayah that, remember a day that you were enemies, killing one another, and now with the blessings of Iman and the religion of Islam, you've turned into brethren. Then she reminds them that you were the ones that, excuse me for saying this, you used to urinate on yourself standing.
Right.
Basically, they did not even have the discipline of using bathrooms, going to a corner. They would just stand and get the job done right there. They would, create their gods out of dates.
And then eat them.
So she says basically, you were uneducated, ignorant people. This is why the pre-Islamic era is called Al-Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah literally means ignorance.
They would bury their daughters too.
They would bury their daughters alive. So Islam came and changed all of that with giving them awareness. Now, how do we gain insight and awareness today, in the world today, where we live, how we live? The way to do that is to read books, to be educated.
Right.
I believe that a community that does not read, a community that is uneducated, is indeed a dead community.
Definitely.
And a community that reads and seeks education and is aware is a vibrant community, is a community that can face the challenges of time. It is a community that can give prosperity to their children, to their family. But a community that doesn't read, then is a community that will always be controlled, that will always be told what to do, even if it's controlled remotely.
Right.
Just look at the Muslim world today. Are they importing goods, or are they the exporters of goods? Obviously, they are the importers. From the cars, to the microwaves, to the
clothes,
to everything, all the technology, to the phones they use, to the TVs they use, to the computers they use, to the weapons they buy to defend themselves. Every single element of their life is imported to them.
Right.
This tells you that we are not equipped enough to be the exporters to the rest of the world, and we don't even have enough to develop the things that we need.
Right.
And why is that? That is because there is a huge lack of education. There's a problem with the educational system, and if we want to change that, then we have to be the ones that will host the best of universities, best of colleges, the best of authors, the best of professors, the best of thinkers. Once they are part of the Muslim community, whether they are in the West or in the Middle East, then you will see a great change. And that is why when you see that there are scholars, there are major scholars that come went into a community, the whole community changes.
Right.
It changes the fate and the face of the entire community. And once, unfortunately, the community has no scholars, then you find that community to be extremely shallow. And this is a point that I'd like to make right here and right now. Communities in America today, communities in the western part of the world today, are in need of several things. Very important things. One of the most important things is they have mosques. I don't think any community in America today lacks a physical building. Most of them are also owned.
Right.
So you'll have, a doctor, a physician, a couple of business owners in the community that will say, you know what, yes, we need a mosque to, gather once a week, twice a week. They'll pitch in and they'll buy something for $500,000, $1 million, $3 million. And that's a physical location, but that physical location will be empty of scholars, will be empty of a resident scholar, somebody who's going to enlighten them in terms of their religion. And that is just like having a hospital without a doctor. I don't care how beautiful it is. At the end of the day, it's not going to get the job done.
Right.
And the job of a masjid is to educate the Muslim community on Islam. Because that is the primary reason why Rasulullah ﷺ was even sent as a prophet. Also, if they have a resident alim, and if they have a masjid and a physical location, they are in need of libraries and a librarian. In the episodes that we did, the animated cartoons, where we try to basically focus on areas where the Muslim community needs to change, called Times for Change, there was a segment that I really liked that said, I am speaking to somebody and I tell him to extend the library, and he says, well, we extended the kitchen.
Right.
We don't have space for classrooms in a library. And that is the situation in many of the Islamic centers. They're extending the kitchen, the cafeteria, the food area, the area where we consume food, and then there is no space for a library. The most important thing in an Islamic facility is indeed the library.
Yeah. I've seen libraries too, unfortunately, at some masajid, that the books, plenty of books, just sitting there gathering dust. No one really goes and grabs a book. And they're there for free, or some of them you could purchase. It's not that expensive, The most expensive book you'll buy is like 20, 40, 50, but there's no price on knowledge. To me, I see the importance of reading books is for us to learn, obviously, gaining knowledge. That's the biggest factor. When it comes to reading books, why should we read a book, like, for example, someone might recommend you a book and you might not like that book. And vice versa, you might recommend that person a book and they might not like it. Why is it important for us to do our own reading and not depend maybe on listening to a speech or things in that nature?
Okay, so the difference between, I think, people getting knowledge at first hand versus knowledge from someone else is, it's a huge difference. And I can draw this picture for you. You see, if I were to give 20 people an article, a book, a magazine, and tell them to read something out of it, and those people had, their own impressions, their own backgrounds. So they will understand that essay or that article or that book differently. And once they retell their story, each person has their own way of articulating a message. So between how they've picked it up and how they've understood it and how they're going to tell it, some things will change.
Right.
And once you read a book yourself, once you experience that firsthand, then you are the person who evaluates that knowledge, who then decides, what to get out of that book and how much to get out of that book at first hand. And, for how long will we depend on other people? For how long will we depend on speakers and scholars and professors and other people to gain knowledge and give us that knowledge,
Right.
in the end of the day, nobody's going to be able to read all the books and gain all knowledge. So you will always depend on other learned people. But I think that that has really spoiled many people, knowing that they can just go into a lecture and just listen to it, or YouTube something, and
Right.
and they don't then have to work hard for themselves.
Right.
So it creates this sense of laziness, and then they'll just never become people who read.
Yeah. Listening to a speech, obviously, about a book, or someone could synthesize 20 books for you, but that's based on their bias, their worldview.
Definitely.
When it comes to reading, picking up a book, some people have a hard time starting. I've heard many people say, like, you know what, I only read when it's for school. I never read. I hate reading. I'll only read if I'm forced to read. So I kind of want to ask, how do you think we could change that in someone? How do you think someone could pick up a book, start reading, and basically stay reading? That way they don't just read.
Yeah, so I wrote a couple of tips yesterday or last night before I went to bed, and I can share that with the viewers.
Yeah.
Some tips that I believe will help them pick up a book, start reading, and continue to read.
Right.
So I think that you have to be practical and setting those goals.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will get excited and they'll go and they'll pick up a huge book and they'll say, I'll finish this in 2 days. If you're just a beginner, that's likely. Yeah, it's likely it can happen, but how likely is it? Not very likely. If you're not used to reading, then obviously your eyes are gonna get tired, your brain's gonna get tired. You're probably not gonna enjoy it after a while. Right. So it's practice. It comes with practice. But if you're used to reading, then 25 pages, 30 pages, 50 pages is a norm for you. 60
Right.
pages is a norm for you. Then you don't have to struggle. So, number one, set special goals for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say that in the next week I'm going to be reading one book. No, say today I'm going to be, so every day I'm going to be reading 20 to 30 pages. And make sure you do that.
Right.
Once you have a specific goal in mind and you're saying, in the next year I'm going to be reading 25 to 30 pages a day, and in the following year you can make that 50 pages a day.
Mm-hmm.
But make sure you meet that goal every single day. You can divide that into 2 segments, one in the morning, one in the night, and but make sure you get it done. That will put you into at least one book a week. Depending on it, you'll average one book a week. You'll average about 50 books, more or less,
Right.
a year. So that's an amazing number. So that's one. That's one way to basically get people to start reading
Mm-hmm.
and stay reading. I think a good time to read is after exercising. People usually are much more alert. They feel much fresh. They feel much fresher. They feel fresh. They feel good.
Right.
They feel alert after they exercise in the morning. So I think the best time to read is, if you wake up, go out, exercise, do a quick jog or whatever it may be, come back, have your breakfast, take a shower. That then will be the best time for you to start reading. Your body and your mind will be alert, and you'll enjoy that reading. And once you enjoy it and you learn from it, then it'll be an incentive for you to continue. Number 3 is, do not get distracted when you read.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're not being distracted by your phone, especially.
Yeah, just lock that phone away somewhere.
Put it away.
Far.
Yeah, put it away. If the 25 pages to 30 pages take you 1 minute each, then make sure that phone is away for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
40 minutes, 45 minutes. Nothing is gonna happen in those 45 minutes.
Yeah, Bill Gates isn't gonna be calling during that
Even
time.
if he does, if you're important enough that he's calling you, I'm sure he's gonna leave his number or call you
Right.
back. So make sure that if you're in public, you're not somewhere where you're easily distracted by your
Mhm.
phone, by a TV, or whatever it may be. Number 4, this is really good advice. Is do it before or after you get busy during the day.
Right.
So before you leave the house, before you go to work, when you're in the train, whatever it may be, do it before you get busy or after you're busy, not during your peak hours of, for example, doing something where you're mentally very occupied. You know, if it's in the middle of work and you have people getting in and out of your office, if it's in the middle of you doing something, then your mind is going to be so scattered you won't be able to focus on your reading material.
Right.
So before obviously is ideal, after still better than, you know, when your mind is scattered. Fifth advice that I can give is try audiobooks.
Right.
You know, if you can get yourself to read a whole book, then divide it into segments. Whenever you can read the book, grab the book. Whenever you can't, then continue with the audiobook. Make sure you're meeting your goals. And today there are many, many ways for you to read an audiobook. You know, there's even an app where you take a picture of the phone, of the book with your phone, and literally I'll start reading the book for you. So there is literally no excuses.
Right.
All the apps that, you know, the audiobook apps available, that will help you. Last advice that I want to give is, if you pick up a book, then you don't like it, or you don't like the first chapter, second chapter, that could be a problem. You know, people could get discouraged. So I would suggest that people would use Blinkist, which is an app that summarizes a book in 15 minutes. Obviously, it will give you literally 5 to 10%, in my opinion, of the book. But it will give you the idea, the bigger picture. If you feel that you will like this book, then go ahead and get yourself the full book.
Yeah.
If you feel that this book is not for you, then you can skip it and go to another book.
Right.
So that is a way, or for you to read summaries, for you to read reviews, Spark Notes, wherever it may be. Try to see what's in that book before you kind of go ahead and spend $15, $20, $12. Sometimes, you know, you could be spending up to $170, $200 on just a book.
Definitely.
And you know, you don't want to leave it halfway. So and you know, there's always the option of buying used books. There's the electronic books. Joining a book club.
I'm sure someone will just tell you, like, hey, pay the shipping and handling, borrow my book, send it back. If you know them, I'm sure it's not a big deal. Also, I think it boils down to time. You know, some people would rather just be like gaming or watching TV or just chilling on social media rather than, like, they like the idea of reading a book, right? Reading sounds good to them, but it's just such a drag. Like, I don't want to read. So I think time also is a big issue to make it habitual. So I know.
You know, I think to add to that.
Yeah.
I feel like books are like food. So if you enjoy this meal, you're gonna eat it, you're gonna finish it, and you're probably gonna go for seconds.
Right.
If you don't, then you're gonna be like, you know, I've had enough today, I'm gonna watch my weight, I'm on a diet.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Right.
It makes it easier for you. So if you want to really enjoy books, then make sure you find you find out which kind of books you like.
Yeah.
What is it that you're interested in? You know, what kind of topics do you enjoy? If you get yourself involved with those books, I am pretty sure then you're going to be reading versus, you know, gaming or because you're going to be gaining knowledge. If you're a businessman, you're going to be doing business better.
Right.
If you're a sports fan, you're going to be learning a lot more about the inside of the sport. If you're, you know, a politician, somebody that enjoys politics, reading a book can really change things around for you, change your perspective, you know. So it will really give you so much insight that you then want to pursue this. So I think, you know, try to basically get your hands on a book that you like. You will enjoy it, I promise.
Yeah. I want to talk about, you know, our next topic is scholars and books. I remember our grandpa, growing up, our grandpa used to have a library the size of like a small home.
Yeah.
6, 7 years old, I'd walk in there, the library, and these shelves would be like 30 feet high. I felt dwarfed in the library, and it seemed like there was thousands and thousands of books when I was that age. And I would just be like, man, he reads all these? I would see him pick out books from every single section of the library.
Yeah.
And at that age, I could only pick out the English section books, but there was any kind of book, do-it-yourself book, autobiographies, history books. It was a plethora of different genres. And you're obviously older than I am. There's stories that that I don't know, maybe special things you want to share with us about that library.
Ayatollah Qazwini, our grandfather, may Allah prolong his life and protect him, has spoken about this library many occasions. They've even done, I think, at least 5, 6 documentaries about him. And in those documentaries, he talks about his books because there's nothing of value to him in this life. I have really never seen him consider something valuable.
Right.
Whatever he owns, it's like he doesn't even refer to it as mine.
Mm-hmm.
But the books, he really is particular about his books. He doesn't want people to touch his books or to mess up his books or to misplace his books, because I think the number of books right now are well over 30,000 in Karbala. And he knows exactly where each book is.
Right.
And he's read every book, and sometimes he can even reference whether it's in the middle of the book, the end of the book, even pages. Bahar al-Anwar is 110 volumes, and he will literally tell you, if you ask him about a topic, he will tell you in which volume out of the 110 you should be looking for. So, mashallah, with his memory, and I'm sure that he refers to those books way too often.
Right.
And he has the ability to maneuver through his library very easily. But he says that he would sleep hungry some nights in Karbala when he was a young man, because he either had to buy a book that he wanted to read,
mm-hmm.
or he didn't want to sell a book.
Right.
A lot of scholars used to buy books and sell them and buy another one, because it was very difficult for them to make ends meet.
Right.
And I think people would rather eat,
definitely,
than keep a book in a library. But
right.
the Sayyid said that he grew up. Stories are amazing that he even says some nights he would not be able to sleep the whole night because of hunger. But he would rather not sell a book, or he would want to go and buy a new book, and he was able to put all this library together. In fact, when he went to exile in different parts of the world, he took this library with him, and the last place which he settled in, was Los Angeles, California.
Right.
And he had moved the majority of this library to California. And obviously when he moved to Karbala, he moved and shipped. The only thing that he took with him were his books.
Mm-hmm.
And alhamdulillah, they're with him now in Karbala. And he really enjoys books. That's a first-hand experience we've had, right?
If he's not lecturing, he's either reading, spending some time with family, but his
greatest passion is books.
Yeah, his greatest passion really is reading. It's awesome. What about a few other scholars? I know Sayyid Mar'ashi Najafi has a wonderful story as well about.
So Sayyid Mar'ashi Najafi has the largest library in Qom, personal library. That library is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I would say hundreds and the hundreds of thousands of books. And obviously he was a grand marja in the city of Qom.
Right.
And he was a book collector, basically. He would collect books and he would keep them as a primary reference, because a lot of books, they're not printed in mass numbers. So whatever was not available in the market, he would make sure that one of those books or copies in his library. And he has Sunni books, Shia books, Islamic books, non-Muslim books, all sorts of books, in his library. It's in the holy city of Qom. And they say that Sayyid Mar'ashi Najafi, may Allah send rahmah to his grave, he has an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
They say that he had a bowl in his room, and this bowl was dirty, and it looked like it was just
Contaminated.
And he would keep that throughout his all his years being in Qom, just a normal student, all the way until he became a marja, and then he became the grand marja.
Right.
This would be right there. So another marja says, I asked him, what is this? What's the story of this bowl? Every time we come, it's somewhere in your main room. He said, this bowl reminds me of who I was and my struggles until I got to where I am. He says, in a period of time, subhanallah, look at the value of our ulama and the value they gave to knowledge. He says, at a point in time, I would have to use this bowl to go and dig up trash, find food. I would put it in this bowl, I would come and wash it in this bowl, and then I would boil it, and then I would eat it. But I would rather do this than sell my books, than give up on my books. Which is an unbelievable story of jihad, of struggle fi sabilillah. Another marja, I was reading his memoirs, he speaks of his father. And he says that, his father was also a person who was financially doing well. And, he said, when the whole family would go hungry for like 2-3 days, then my mom would say, Sayyid, the kids are hungry, you got to sell one of your books, and we got to feed the kids. And he would then give this book to the marja and say, son, go and sell this book and bring some money. And he said, as soon as I would get to the door of the house, he would call me back and say, come back, I'll figure out another way. This tells you that, scholars were so attached to knowledge, so attached to what was in those books. They valued knowledge so much. Money was worthless to them. Money, if it can bring you knowledge, if it can bring you the forgiveness of Allah, if it can bring you happiness to your family and to your folks and your loved ones and your friends, that is then worth it. But if you're just collecting it, what would be the use of money?
Yeah.
Then you are the protector of money, not the other way around.
That's true. I know, for example, in a library with 100,000 books or 200,000 books, there has to be maybe one book that, because when I think of it, I think of, are all books beneficial to read, right? Is it beneficial for me to sit here and read maybe a Harry Potter novel, or a comic book, or a sci-fi novel? I know personally, I feel cheated at this point in my life. Growing up in grade school, I'd read, the majority of my reading was novels, and that helped me with my grammar and maybe expanding my imagination. But now I feel almost cheated if I'm reading a novel. Not to say all novels are not good. One of the best books I read, Kite Runner, is a novel. But are all books good books or worth reading in that?
To be honest with you, this is a very subjective question.
Right.
I don't know how to answer what is good. Is it good as in you will gain something from it? Is it good as in it'll increase in your vocab? Is it good as in... I think for each age group, what's good can be defined differently,
Right.
If you're a teenager, if you're a child, then I think imaginary books, basically fiction, can be helpful.
Right.
They'll teach them a few things here and there. And once you grow up, you shouldn't be reading fiction. You shouldn't be reading comic. You should be reading non-fiction. You should be reading things that will increase in your ability and to judge things, to to evaluate things.
Right.
It should increase in your general knowledge, make you a smarter person, more intellectual person. So definitely, I mean, I would recommend it for adults.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a subject of how fiction has influenced the world globally.
Right.
Well, that's a very prolonged topic, but I think that, at the end of the day, fiction has also created the wrong belief for so long
Mm-hmm.
that for now it's almost become part of what people believe in.
Right.
Because it's been said and done over and over and over for many years, and it starts with you when you're a kid, and it continues to basically influence you once you're an adult, that it almost becomes part of an inseparable nature of human beings that basically read nonfiction. Read fiction.
Reading is better than not reading, but
Absolutely.
sometimes it's, you want to pick the right thing to read.
Absolutely.
Our next point that we're going to be talking about is our favorite books, how we like to read, what kind of books we're reading right now, maybe some tips we could help people to read and stay reading. So let's start off with what books are you reading currently right now?
I personally finished a couple of books. With the COVID, alhamdulillah, I've been able to,
There's more time to read.
yeah,
Definitely.
read more books for sure. So, a couple of interesting ones I read. I recently read Michelle Obama's memoirs.
Right.
I'm not saying it was the greatest book.
Is that
but-
her autobiography?
Yeah, her autobiography, which talks. For me, the interesting part was Barack Obama's early character.
Right.
When he was a young man, he had taken some years off school,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes back into law school. She had graduated law school before him, and then how he was able to build his career, how he was able to influence other people around him.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a point in the book where she says attorneys would ask this law student for help.
Wow.
So he was a brilliant man, dedicated man, and obviously he was able to get himself into the White House.
Office, yeah.
Oval Office. That was an interesting book for me. I also read a book called The Educated, which is it's about a life of a woman that comes from a very strict Mormon family. And basically her father is somebody who had brainwashed them with their religious dogmas, where they believed that he kept telling them that they basically as women should just stay at home, cook and clean.
Right.
They should not pursue education. Another thing she encounters is that her father does not believe in universities. He says this is where people will get brainwashed and go astray from God.
Right.
They would not go and see a physician.
Wow.
Physicians were also, the devil. So they would only use herbal medication that they created. So imagine a girl growing up in this environment.
Right.
Then she basically goes to college and works her way all the way to a PhD from prestigious schools. And her conflict with her father, with her parents, with her family, with her village, but how she was able to basically get herself a PhD.
Right.
That was an inspiring story for me. I also read because I like politics.
Right.
So I recently read another book called The Road to Unfreedom.
Mm-hmm.
It's about Putin and Russia and American relations and what have you.
Sounds interesting.
Should I go on or should we stop?
No.
Yeah, I read another. Yuval Harari is definitely one of the best authors out there right now. I read all his books.
Right.
And I think he has some really, really amazing ideas that are interestingly very
Relevant.
to what's happening to our world today.
Yeah.
So I mean, you will never run out of amazing books. Literally, you'll never run out of amazing books. That's how a book can sell 80 million copies. You know, some books. How is it that some books can sell 80 million copies? You know, the bestseller of all time, 500 million copies, 200 million copies, 120 million copies, 49 different languages, things like that. That tells you there's got to be something in that book.
Right.
I don't know about those people who didn't read a whole book for 12 months, for a whole year. That's just awful, because you know you're missing out on a lot of information.
Yeah. I've read those Yuval Harari books, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He has a book, Homo Deus, The History of Man. He's brilliant, you know. Obviously, I don't agree with everything he says.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you don't either, but he even has TED Talks and stuff. I urge everyone to read about what he thinks about artificial intelligence and AI.
Yeah, so inshallah we have a topic that
Right.
we will be talking about, artificial intelligence, down the list. We'll focus on some of the things that he has said, and then I don't want to say I would disagree, because I think he's a brilliant mastermind when it comes to that particular field.
Right.
So I can't really say but I would have a different opinion.
Right.
And
There's a few holes in the argument.
We can talk about
I'm currently reading a book by Leslie Hazelton called After the Prophet, and I'm also reading a book called Yemen Endures. It's about the trials and tribulations that Yemen is going through right now. And one book I'm really anticipating, it should be coming out pretty soon. It's a book called War in the Age of Trump. It's by my favorite author, Patrick Coburn. I hope everyone looks into him too. He's a phenomenal journalist and author. And one of my also all-time favorite books is American Crescent. That's a wonderful book too. I think we kind of wrapped it up. We'll take some
about the American Crescent, because I think
so
a lot of people
the American Crescent is the book written by our uncle, and I'm not just plugging this. I don't have stock in the book. But I actually learned a lot of stuff from our family that I didn't even know.
Too,
and it's like a novel. It walks you through the life of an imam of a masjid and a scholar, and his trials and tribulations, what he went through throughout his whole life, and how he basically lived in the United States. And it's a wonderful book. I recommend it. It's an easy read. I think everyone should. That's interested in it and that kind of topic, everyone should pick it up and read it.
That's wonderful. Very good. I hope that this, what we have offered today, will encourage more people to read, start picking up books.
Hopefully we hyped up our audience to read,
Yeah, I hope so. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, "Utlubul ilma walau bis-Sin."
Yeah.
Seek knowledge, even if it were for you to travel to China.
Right. Hopefully that's figurative though, like the distance wise, because I don't think anyone wants to go to China right now.
Yeah. So, so basically, that's what it meant. It was the farthest place for people to go from the Arabian Peninsula, and the Prophet said basically go for it to seek knowledge. And today that has become so accessible, that has become so easy for people to just get on Amazon, get your book, get on Kindle, get a book. It's just so easy. There's absolutely no excuses. You can buy a book, a used one, resell it to Amazon. I mean, there's millions of ways for us to stay reading. There's no excuses. I know people who, I've had experience with people who have started reading after a long time, and it's difficult for them.
Right.
But my advice to them is to continue. Please continue to read. It's going to be difficult in the beginning. Don't give up.
Yeah.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah, I think one of the questions we had was from a sister that said, she used to read all the time and loved reading, and she's a mother now and very busy, and doesn't really have that much time to read other than here and there, or the books she reads to her children.
Uh-huh.
So, what are a few tips for her maybe to help her out?
Well, I think I gave all the tips that I know out
Yeah.
today about books, but I would suggest that after she, does her morning prayers, or after she sends her kids to school, I don't know what their age is,
Right,
even if it's 15 minutes.
right.
If it's 15 minutes and she's reading 10 to 15 pages a day, that's going to add up.
Yeah.
Every 10 days, she's going to be almost.
I think audiobooks too in her
Yeah.
situation.
Absolutely.
When she's
Why
driving
not?
her kids or.
Absolutely.
Um,